Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. We are in the last day of February. Many of the USC fans, y'all know what that means. Spring practice is on the horizon, and specifically for this USC program, there are not only a ton of storylines going into spring practice, there is a ton of buzz around this football program. Look, I'm on the message boards with y'all, I'm on Twitter. I see the excitement around this USC program, and I'll start with this. All right, where is USC at as a program under Lincoln Riley? I know he's going into year 4. It feels like it's year 1 again. And why I say that is, look, when Lincoln Riley got to USC, he missed on some coaching staff hires. Like this coaching staff, when Lincoln Riley first took over USC, was, for lack of better terms, a disaster. The front office was pretty much non-existent. Going into the 2025 year, it feels like everything is firing on all cylinders around this USC program. That means the front office, that means talent acquisition, that means the coaching staff as well. So I look at 2025 as a massive year for this program, where if you can go out, and I'm not saying USC needs to win a national championship in 2025, but if you can go out and win big football games and show that this USC program is going back to where it belongs as a program, the sky's the limit for USC over the next 24 months. But I mean, that requires you winning a lot of football games in 2025 and showing everybody that USC's on its way back to where it belongs. What do we need to see in spring practice? That's what I want to get into. Before we do, and as always, the USC fans, it's been a blast talking this program the last couple of days. It sounds like it's going to be a really fun next couple of weeks on the recruiting trail for USC. We will break down the commitments as they come in. We will preview all the visitors that will be on USC's campus over the next couple of weeks. If you are into the recruiting world, it's going to be really, really fun. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We're going to talk about the quarterback battle. We're going to talk about a few other position battles, but we're also going to talk about some personnel usage and some potential changes in positions for a couple players. Would love to hear from y'all in the comment section in terms of how we're feeling about those. Appreciate you guys. Without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start, not bury the lead here, the quarterback battle, of which I think there is one. Look, I think Jaden is the starting quarterback, the quote-unquote quarterback one, heading into spring practice. Make no mistake about it, there's going to be a quarterback battle that ensues over the next couple of weeks and maybe even months going into fall camp. Let's start with what we want to see from really both of these quarterbacks. To me, the upside for both of these quarterbacks, both Jaden and Husan Longstreet, is significantly higher than Miller Moss. And that's not a shot at Miller Moss. It's just he is what he is from an athletic standpoint, from an arm talent standpoint. Miller Moss last year by far had better command of the offense than a guy like Jaden. But Jaden probably offered a little bit more upside and a little bit more creativity in terms of how you can use Jaden. Well, I think Husan Longstreet offers that same kind of upside, arguably even more upside in terms of what he can do as an athlete and what he can do from an arm talent standpoint. To me, I know both of these quarterbacks are better fits in the Lincoln Riley offense. They offer higher upside than what we saw from Miller Moss last year. What I want to see from both of them is, hey, can you show command of the offense? I know you can do all the flashy stuff. We saw that from Jaden last year. We saw that from Husan Longstreet the last couple of years at the high school ranks. Lincoln Riley is going to scheme it up for you. He's going to put an ideal offense around you. What quarterback can play within the offense more? Yeah, we want to see that playmaking ability from both of these quarterbacks, both of which quarterbacks are very capable of doing that. But what quarterback can keep the ball out of harm's way, can be on time in the pocket? That's what I'm looking for, because those are the two question marks you have with both of them. Where Jaden, go back to last year, that look, Jaden made a lot of really high caliber throws and made a lot of plays at the quarterback position, but there were a lot of plays on the film that just you kind of scratched your head. Husan Longstreet is a true freshman that is no doubt going to have some growing pains as he gets to USC. We know Lincoln Riley is not afraid to put a freshman quarterback out there if that freshman quarterback's capable. Can Husan Longstreet show that? It's going to be a really interesting storyline, but I think USC is in a good spot. You got two quarterbacks that you know can play. Which one wins the job? We're going to find out over the next couple of weeks, but I want to see whatever quarterback can really take command of the offense and do the small things right. That's kind of what we're looking for. Number two, and probably the second biggest question mark we have going into spring practice, the right tackle spot, you know what 4 out of your 5 starting offensive linemen are going to be, at least in my opinion, right? Elijah Page has left tackle on lock. I think he can be a first-team All-Big Ten guy. I think Elijah Page, and you guys have heard me bang the table, so I will keep it short. We could be talking about Elijah Page as a top 15 NFL draft pick in 12 months. That's how good I think Elijah Page can be, and quite frankly, that's how good he was playing at the end of 2024. DJ Wingfield, I think, will factor in. He's a guy that I think could push for right tackle. I mean, he was a guy that played right tackle at the G5 level in 2023. I think I like him more at guard. That's where he played at Purdue last year. Janory Reed's coming in. He's starting at center. Alani Noah, similar to Elijah Page, started to play better football towards the back half of his redshirt freshman year. I got confidence in 4 out of the 5 starting offensive linemen. Then it gets to right tackle where you got 2 young, inexperienced kids that I think offer some upside. I think Tobias Raymond is probably in the lead as we sit, but what does the development look like from Justin going into year 2? Like, he played a lot of football against Texas A&M in that bowl game at right tackle. Pretty dang good for a true freshman playing at the right tackle position, especially going up against the Texas A&M team that, I mean, most of the guys that he was going against are going to be NFL draft picks. That was a very, very talented Texas A&M defensive line. I thought Justin looked the part. And you could tell he was a freshman from a physicality standpoint at times. It's a big functional athlete. So you got 2 young tackles that I think we have confidence in. All right, who's going to go win the job in spring practice? This is a position to me where I think Lincoln Riley needs to be very honest with himself and say, are we good enough up front before we go into 2025? Because I think this is a massive year for USC, and you do not want to go into a year in the Big Ten where you got question marks on the offensive line. We saw USC get aggressive, both on the recruiting trail in the transfer portal, to fill in gaps of this roster. I like the idea of, hey, let's go into spring practice and give our young bucks the opportunity to go win the job. But if you got questions coming out of spring practice, you got to make sure you go address that right tackle position in the transfer portal. We'll see how USC goes about it, and it's obviously going to be contingent on what the right tackle position looks like during spring practice. I think from a depth standpoint too, you're probably looking for some other offensive linemen to, show out. I think that could be a position, even if it's not going out to the portal and landing a starter. I look at the offensive line and say, look, I feel good about 4 out of the 5 starting offensive linemen, but do we have 8, 9, 10 guys that we trust in that room? Because that's really what you want going into the Big Ten. It's very hard to go through a whole college football season and not have to go into your depth on the offensive line. You want to make sure you're in a spot where, hey, if we do have a guy go down, can we keep it rolling? Every good program can. And you look at USC and say maybe 1 or 2 more additions in the portal from a depth standpoint might be necessary. Number 3, who's wide receiver 3, and what do the tight ends look like? Lake McCree, as solid as they come. You got a couple of young tight ends that are coming up through the pipeline, whether it's Walker Lyons, whether it's Joey Olsen, whether it's Walter Matthews. Can we get one of these young bucks? And my pick is Joey Olsen. Y'all know I've been a Joey Olsen fan ever since he committed to USC. I'm not selling stock in any of them because as a true freshman tight end, it's hard to get on the football field. There's a lot of things you got to be able to do. Going into year 2, this is normally when you see tight ends kind of break out. We got a bunch of talented ones, and we got a guy that we know can play in Lake McCree. Which of the young tight ends breaks out in spring ball? That's probably a question we're looking at. And then at the wide receiver spot, this is a take that I feel very, very good about. I think you could argue that the wide receiver position is in a better spot than it was 12 months ago. And I think a lot of USC fans are like, what an idiotic take, right? We had Zachariah Branch and Deuce Robinson last year, along with Jacoby Lane, Xavier Jordan. We had a guy like Kyron Hudson. We had a guy like Kyle Ford. The reason I'm saying that is USC going into this year's spring practice, you know who your guys are. You know who your difference makers are. That's Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane. I think USC spent so much time, not only in spring practice, fall camp, but clearly throughout the 2024 year of trying to figure it out. And there was, to me, it felt like Lincoln Riley was forcing guys like Zachariah Branch on the football field, and kind of fully knowing it was Mekhi Lemon who was the better football player. Now that it's a little bit more of a clear picture of who your difference makers are and who you want to scheme up football opportunities, that to me almost puts USC in a better spot. Now you do need some depth to kind of break out, because outside of Jacoby Lane and Xavier Jordan, or excuse me, Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon, there aren't a ton of proven commodities. What does Xavier Jordan look like going into year two? What does Jay Fair look like going into year two with this USC program? Guy like Corey Sims certainly is physically ready to play as a freshman. Who steps up around Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon to be producers in this USC passing attack is probably the third question mark I have on the offensive side of the football. Going over to the defensive side, I want to start with this. We've been saying it all year. This defensive line, I mean, if you, what I should have done is like, here's the defensive line depth chart going into spring practice. We should have just compared it to what it was 12 months ago. Off the top of my head, 12 months ago, you had Bear Alexander still with the program. You had Kobe Pepe. You had Nate Clifton going into spring practice. And then you had a true freshman like G-Day coming through. You had Devin Tompkins on the roster. Last year, the defensive line depth chart consisted of like two players that we knew could play. That was Bear Alexander and Nate Clifton. Kobe Pepe had never really played before last year. Devin Tompkins never really played before last year. There was massive question marks on the defensive line last year. Now we fast forward to going into spring. We got 8 guys that I feel confident can contribute for USC. That's not even to mention Floyd Boucard, who I think is grossly flying under the radar. And I probably blame Jakeem Stewart for taking all the media attention, rightfully so. Jakeem Stewart's a good football player. Floyd Boucard, that dude can play too. And so you have so many, not only so many bodies, so much more depth, but you have so much more size too. I mean, Nate Clifton, Gavin Mayer, Devin Tompkins, those were all guys that were probably soaking wet 295 pounds. They were undersized. Yeah, Keyshawn Silver goes 340. Ja Jarrett, I think, goes 350 almost. Jakeem Stewart's up to 300 pounds. G. Abasiri up to 300 pounds. Carlin Jones up to around 315. Kobe Pepe, we know, is a big dog. Yeah, a ton more, not only a ton more bodies, a ton more talent, but you have also so much more size. And that was such a problem for USC. Now, that's not really a storyline. That was kind of me going on a tangent saying this defensive line is legit. Like, it went from by far the biggest question mark last year to maybe the biggest strength of this USC defense. Where I want to start in terms of spring practice storylines, defensive personnel usage. And why I'm bringing that up is not only are we going into year 2 of D'Anton Lynn, and so the players are more comfortable playing in the D'Anton Lynn system. Guess what? D'Anton Lynn and these new coaches know these players better too. And I think you could see some position changes on the defensive side of the football. A guy like Anthony Beavers, does he move down to linebacker because, USC's kind of thin at that position? Elijah Newby, maybe the most physically gifted freshman last year. He didn't play, but in terms of physical traits, he might be the most gifted one they brought in. How do we use him? Does he come off the edge? Does he play off-ball linebacker? Does he do a little bit of a Harold Perkins type role that the Harold does at LSU? Or maybe like an Abdul Carter at Penn State? A lot of versatility with Elijah Newby. And if there's one thing that, I historically love about D'Anton Lynn, going back to his time at UCLA, he knows how to use his personnel. He's going to look for the ideal spots to put his players. And so a guy like Elijah Newby, does he play off-ball linebacker? Does he come off the edge? Is he kind of a hybrid guy that's used in a lot of different ways? You could see some real creativity with Dan Lynn. Last year was just, hey, we got to install this new defense and we got to get players acclimated. Going into year 2, now you elevate, now you build, now you look to how to maximize this defense going into 2025. And part of that maximization process is maybe kind of moving some guys into some ideal positions. Number 5, new look secondary. I don't think Dan Lynn loved the secondary last year. They went to the transfer portal and tried to bring in some guys. You go back to the film and say USC played a lot of off-cover 3 stuff. They just didn't have a ton of confidence. You saw very little press man. They did not have a ton of confidence in terms of these defensive backs last year winning at the line of scrimmage. Very rarely did you see USC get aggressive with the secondary. And I think that was a result of, hey, we probably don't have a ton of confidence in our guys out on the boundary, and we're concerned about wide receivers running past their dudes. Do we see a change there? Does D'Anton Lynn like the secondary a little bit more? And quite frankly, there's some reason to like it. Marcellus Williams going into year 2. Bishop Fitzgerald is, in my opinion, a massive upgrade from a guy like Achille Arden last year. You get to keep Kamari Ramsey, who was outside of Eric Gentry, probably the best football player on this defense last year. What does the new look secondary look like? You have some new faces stepping up. Do we like the secondary more than we do last year? And I think just because of the pass rush should be so much better for USC, maybe that allows you to be a little bit more aggressive. Where, last year the USC pass rush was non-existent. And so Dan Lynn probably couldn't play as much man coverage as he wanted, because if you want to play man coverage, you got to get home. I wonder if you see some changes in the secondary and the secondary's performance and how they're used, because now you got a front seven, specifically a defensive line that really can impact the passer. So this feels like such a big year for USC. You put together a successful season, and again, that's not national championship. I mean, would love it if it is, but it doesn't have to be. But if you just show that, hey, we're getting better, we're developing more NFL talent, we are starting to become that win. We're starting to become that winning program again. All this momentum that you're seeing kind of built up on the recruiting trail that kind of died off as the season started, you're not going to see it die off. And you're going to sign a really good class in 2026. And then you're going to build going into the 2026 year. Look, you don't just snap your fingers, fix everything, and expect a national championship. You got to build up to it. And USC setting that foundation at an extremely, extremely high level. And now you got to start building up. And that's kind of what this 2025 season to me feels like. Super fired up. Y'all know that. It's going to be fun talking this team in spring practice. It's going to be fun talking about this team on the trail. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later.